Usually what I'll do is like I'll get my writing in during the day, like while I'm with my youngest, and it kind of works nice. Like my kids are like my writing sprint partners. I can get in like a really good like 15-30 minute chunk. And then there's some distraction, right? Like something happens, someone's crying, whatever it may be. And that is almost like a really good way for me to focus on the time that I do have and try to get the most out of as little time as I can. And B, those distractions end up kind of like reorienting me, where it's like I might just be kind of driving myself into a corner and then something happens, and then that works as like a reframing opportunity for me to be like, while I'm helping them out with something, or pulling them apart from fighting each other or whatever it may be, that's an opportunity for me to be like, in the back of my head I'm thinking about what I was just writing and be like, actually, like this is like a cooler way to go about it. But I've had to adapt and be less focused on micromanaging all the time that I have, and more focused on taking advantage of time that I have in the moment and then being adaptable.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Pint Portal Author Podcast. I am your host, Herman Steuernagel, and I am here with you today trying to learn how to turn your writing into a successful author career. I've got another bit of a different episode here for you today. This was a live recording that I did with my good friend, Adrian M Gibson. You might know him from the SFFAddicts podcast, but he co-hosts with MJ Kuhn and Greta Kelly. If you haven't listened to that podcast and you're a fan of science fiction and fantasy, they have a wide range of amazing authors that they pull on their show. A couple months ago, they had Matt Dinniman. They had a panel at Worldcon last year with Brandon Sanderson and George R.R. Martin, Robin Hobb, Ryan Cahill, and one other name I can't remember off the top of my head, but they've interviewed all of the sci-fi and fantasy authors that you know and love, and they have so much fun on their show. But today's episode, we've got Adrian on talking about his latest release, A Murder Most Fungal. We also talk about how he got into writing, how his podcast helps his writing, as well as a wide range of topics, including food and culture, and how culture influences his writing as well. Yeah, we just had a lot of fun. Again, it's a little bit of a different episode. It's not as business focused as a regular episode. That's what these live episodes are meant to be. But I did want to share it with the wider audience because Adrian is a wealth of information, and his podcast, along with MJ and Greta, is one of the best sci-fi and fantasy podcasts out there, if not the best. So I wanted to give him a chance to reach out to you guys as well. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, hit the like button. If you're listening on Spotify or any other platform, be sure to follow along on those channels as well. But also head over to the YouTube channel at Pint Portal, because building a larger audience helps me reach more authors like you, helps me to continue to do this. And I really just want to chat with these authors and share our conversations with you. So that is what we are doing here. If you are new here, welcome. And as I mentioned, this was a live recording. We actually recorded this a few months back. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about my Kickstarter, which was going on at the time, or just about to go live for Flower and Forge. I do have a new Kickstarter coming out because I am just that crazy, but it's going to be launching in the fall. So if you missed the Flower and Forge Kickstarter, I've got another one for my upcoming release that I have barely talked about yet. But the title of the book is called Interdimensional Drink Master. I don't even have a cover for it yet. It's in the process of being designed, but I'm hoping to launch the Kickstarter in October so that we can have a fantastic release in February. I'm really going to try to build this up to have an epic release. So stick around for that if you are interested in checking that out. Links are in the description below. Also, please check out the links for my sponsors. I've got a couple of new ones. I've got Publisher Champ, who is a aggregator of all of your dashboards. So if you've been frustrated that you have to click from Amazon to Kobo to Drafted Digital to Barnes & Noble to Shopify to all of the places you sell your books to in order to pull your numbers together into your own spreadsheet or however you're tracking your sales, Publisher Champ is a amazing resource. It's one of the best tools that I have because it just saves me so much time having to bounce around between all these different sites. So that link is in the description below. It is an affiliate link, but you get 10% off of your subscription. Also, be sure to check out Publisher Rocket. You have heard me talk about Publisher Rocket before. Check out the details in the link below. It is another great resource for you in order to optimize your Amazon listing for both ads and organic sales. Check out the links below, help support the show. Now let's get on with my conversation with Adrian. All right, well, welcome everyone who is here to the Pint and Portal Author Podcast Guest Tap Live Sessions. This is the second live session that we have done as part of the Pint and Portal Author Podcast. And these are a lot of fun. It's just a chance for me to basically hang out with my friends who are launching books, which is awesome. And something that with the new format of the show, I haven't had as much of a chance to do, but I am very happy to welcome here today, Adrian M Gibson. How are you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
You are so welcome. So we have got the first stop on it's the second live session. It is the first stop on the new book tour, which we are going to chat all about today.
For A Murder Most Fungal.
Yeah. So most people who are listening, hopefully, know who you are through your own podcast, which is the SFFAddicts podcast, which you are now one of 3 co-hosts. The last time we...
Yeah. So yeah, I think that was 2 years ago. And then I released Mushroom Blues, and then Greta Kelly joined MJ Kuhn and I in of 2025.
Yes. So we chatted I looked it up. It was March of 2024. So it's just over 2 years. We've chatted in between, but on the show, it's been 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who might have caught the first episode, and if you haven't, I'll link it, once everything is up. So you can go back and watch that episode. For those of us who might have, not those of us, those of our listeners who might have missed the last 2 years of your journey and everything going on, I guess, first of all, give us a quick introduction of who you are and let us, fill us in a little bit about the last 2 years.
For sure, man. I mean, it's been a lot, like a lot. I mean, you know, because we chat quite often, but yeah, I mean, first of all, just an introduction to me. I'm one of 3 co-hosts on SFFAddicts, and that's our interview podcast where we interview authors, primarily SFF, but we're also dipping into horror here and there as well. And then we'll usually do like a 2-parter with each author. One part is an interview. We say that one's for the readers, and then the masterclass, that one's for the writers. So the masterclass is centered around some aspect of writing, whether it's writing craft, publishing, marketing. We started doing like Indie Appreciation Month in July last year, and we're going to do it again this year. So that's an opportunity for us to focus on self-publishing for an entire month. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really fun way for us to interview authors about their books. And then the authors are able to they're able to give something back to the writers out there about something they're super fascinated with when it comes to writing, which is really cool. So someone might be like, I love writing about like cyberpunk. And another person might be like, I like talking about outlining. And so there's a lot of different variety there, which has been really, really cool. And the podcast has just blown up over the last couple of years since we last chatted, especially since we did a live episode in August at Seattle WorldCon, where we did like a live panel with George R. R. Martin and Sanderson, Robin Hobb, Rebecca Roanhorse, and Ryan Cahill, talking about the shifting landscape of epic fantasy.
Just a few authors.
Just a few, yeah.
Just a few randos. Like, who knows who they are, but...
So that was kind of like an inflection point, and things have just kind of like blown up since then. I mean, we've had inflection points before that with like certain authors that we interview, but that was definitely like the biggest leap that we've seen. And then on the personal front, I published Mushroom Blues 2 years ago in March 2024. And since then, the book has sold like thousands of copies beyond what I'd ever expected.
So awesome.
Been nominated for awards, got second place in SPFBO, the self-published fantasy blog off, and then got translated into Italian, and a bunch of things happening on that front. And then I also launched a Kickstarter with some friends back in November, the Book of Spores.
Yeah.
And that campaign did really well, and we're super happy with it. And we're kind of in the process right now of doing production and all the behind the scenes stuff to get the book in people's hands. And then that'll be kind of delivering over the summer. And then in early fall, we'll get into like general release and just getting the book out to the general public. But yeah, like we ended up making like 50,000 with that campaign, which is way more than we'd expected. And it's kind of like jump-started our, kind of publishing brains in terms of like, what else can we do?
Right. Yeah.
And so we've got a couple projects going on behind the scenes on the Kickstarter front. And then as of last week, I'm now the publishing project manager for Grimdark Magazine's novellas. So
That's awesome, man. Congratulations on
man.
that.
They've released 3 novellas so far, one with Richard Swan, The Scour. They released Michael Fletcher and Anna Smith Sparks. I can't remember the name. In the Shadows of Something. It's on the tip of my tongue. And then Cast and Gain. Yeah, and then Cast and Gain by Essa Henson. And then they got a new one coming out in June, at the end of June, by Daniel Polanski, called the Soft Touch. So basically, like, those novellas, they're pushing forward in terms of, like, you know, their role in the novella publishing space, and I'm going to be heading up that whole side of the operation, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's incredible. So that is so much that has happened in 2 years. It's absolutely insane. But it's hard to believe that only 2 years has passed.
I know, dude.
All of
my God,
all of that going on.
Yeah.
So now, effectively, what you have just told me is that you haven't slept in 2 years.
I mean, I have 2 young boys as well, so doubly so. I have, like, you know, somehow managing to stay alive.
Yeah,
and do all this stuff.
Yeah, so we'll talk about, I don't want to talk too much about the panel and about the podcast because I know we're going to have you back with MJ and Greta. I'd like to have the 3 of you on to chat about that side of things a little bit more. And of course, this is the first stop on your tour for your upcoming book, A Murder Most Fungal. So we're going to talk all about that. I'm just pulling up the channel here because Riverside never shows me when people are chatting.
The live
I've
chat.
just realized the live chat. So
I was looking for that, man. I'm looking for that in the in the dashboard.
Yeah, and you know, Daniel was telling me that it's here. There is a chat, but it's like a chat between us 2. So I'm just
there is a live chat, but I don't know how it functions. I'm just gonna say hello to everyone and see if it works. I don't know who that's going to, and we'll see.
I did that last time when I was chatting with Michael, and I think it just went to him. If people are here, I've got YouTube pulled up.
Hello, everyone. Just whoever's out there.
Welcome here. Say hello. I always forget. I'm so not used to doing live sessions, and because my episodes are pre-recorded. So then all of a sudden, when I do a live episode, I'm like, oh, right, people are chatting with us. So we will keep that in mind. Yeah. Cool.
Fingers crossed it works.
Yeah, we've got chat there. Yeah, so I'm just going to drop it right in the YouTube chat directly. That will work fine. Try not to be distracted by my former self of a minute and a half ago, whatever the delay is to YouTube.
We're in the past and present simultaneously.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so what I want to ask you, with all of that going on, which is absolutely incredible. So first of all, congratulations on all of that. I mean, the panel at Worldcon was fantastic.
Thank you.
You know, alone that A, that you were able to orchestrate that, B, that it was such a boon to your podcast, because I mean, you do produce a fantastic show and it deserves to be heard by sci-fi and fantasy fans. I always get value out of it. You get some amazing guests, which is great. And yeah, you're right. The dual episode per author is, I mean, such a great idea. 1 for you, because you only have to record one. One block, and 2,
that was part of it. That was part of the impetus, was like, yeah, we could just do 1 recording session and that covers like 2 whole weeks, right, of content.
Yeah, because I mean, effectively you only have to do 2 recordings a month then, right?
A month.
And because there's 3 of you, I mean, that makes that manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, I'm curious what the rest of your schedule kind of looks like now, because I know you do design work as well that you didn't even talk about. I know you have a family. So, you know, what is your date like? How do you actually manage to schedule your day these days?
I mean, it's pretty flexible lately, just because, like, I drop my oldest son off at school, and then my youngest is at home with me. And so my day starts kind of like when I drop my oldest off, and then I come home. That's usually around like 9 o'clock. And so it's like my day starts at 9. And my youngest is super chill. Like, when it's just me and him, he's just like hanging out, man. He and I will, like, it'll just be like this combination of like intermittent playtime and me doing work and he's playing around me. And then, you know, like, I'll get in like a workout session or something like that. Or, you know, we'll play together for an hour. Like, I'll do work for an hour. So it's really flexible in that sense, up until like, you know, noon, make lunch. And then my oldest is back home from school around like 1:30 kind of thing. And then afternoons is more or less like the boys are playing together. So I might squeeze in a little bit of extra time there. And then evening times, after like they've had dinner, they've gone to bed. Evenings are always like that very, I would say much more like lenient block of time where it's like my wife and I can spend time together. I usually work on like podcasting and design stuff at night because usually by the end of the day, I'm a bit more like brain dead. And that's the kind of
Yeah.
work that I can do that doesn't necessarily require as much mental attention and energy. And so it's like usually what I'll do is like I'll get my writing in during the day, like while I'm with my youngest, and it kind of works nice. He's like, I was joking around with like MJ and Greta like a week ago, and I was basically saying that like my kids are like my writing sprint partners. So it's like I can get in like, here's like a really good like 15-30 minute chunk, and then there's some distraction, right? Like something happens, someone's crying, someone like peed their pants or something like that, you know, whatever it may be.
Right.
And that is almost like a really good way for me to focus on the time that I do have and try to get the most out of as little time as I can. And those distractions end up kind of like reorienting me where it's like I might just be kind of driving myself into a corner and then something happens, and then that works as like a reframing opportunity for me to be like, while I'm helping them out with something or, you know, pulling them apart from fighting each other or whatever it may be, that's an opportunity for me to be like, in the back of my head, I'm thinking about what I was just writing and be like, actually, like this is like a cooler way to go about it. This is like a more efficient way to carry out the scene, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So a lot of it is just kind of like incremental work done throughout the day, but I've had to adapt and be as, I would say, like less focused on micromanaging all the time that I have and more focused on taking advantage of time that I have in the moment and then being adaptable as things occur around me, kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that. I think that is, I mean, it really sounds like a great, in some ways it sounds really distracting, but in some ways, like you said, you have to take advantage of the focus time that you have, and you kind of know that. So as long as you're able to hone in right away and not get distracted by Facebook or something like that and use that time efficiently, I could see that being, like you said, essentially doing writing sprints in between those times, and you maybe don't know when the end time is of that sprint, but you know you only have this time before the next distraction comes.
Right, exactly. And it's kind of like it puts me in the mindset of, you know, sometimes like, I don't know, like when I was writing Mushroom Blues, like I would need like quite a warm-up period until I kind of got into the groove of the writing itself. And like now I don't need a warm-up period. Like I jump right into it, and it's like my head's already like spinning with these ideas, and I jump right in and I'm like, let's go, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like before I was a bit of like a golden retriever where I was just like kind of like flopping around and like distracted by everything. And now I'm like much more focused, you know, kind of like,
so what's
like a German Shepherd police dog or something. Like let's roll, let's go. You know
you're
what I mean?
honed in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what caused that change? Because that's, to be honest, something I struggle with a lot because I have so much going on. My ADHD takes over. And I'm like, I need to quickly do this before, and then all of a sudden 3 hours have passed and I haven't done a stitch of writing. So, you know, what has changed from Mushroom Blues until now that you've been able to hone that in a little bit better?
I mean, on one hand, like I'll talk about social media real quick because I think that has a huge part to do with it. Usually, like I try to do like around 7 to 10K steps a day. And that'll just be like me walking around my garden like a you know, someone trying to quit smoking or some shit. Just like pacing around my garden. That'll be time that I can get in some like, you know, half an hour of reading or on like my Kindle, or that'll be like my dedicated social media time. So I'll just kind of set up my day and be like, okay, I get home from dropping my son off. I've got like from 9 to 10 to do whatever social media stuff I need to do, or emails or like administrative stuff. So usually I'll kind of set aside like a little chunk, and then I'll just like have my phone and I'll just like walk around my garden for like half an hour or whatever. And there's my posts for the day. There's my emails done. There's my, I mean, that's not like my workout. Like I'll also do that.
But you got your steps in, right? Yeah.
Getting my steps in kind of thing. And that also works as a bit of an opportunity for like, okay, I'm doing these steps, getting into a bit of a rhythm. And that also helps to kind of prep my mind for my writing session, essentially. And it's mostly just because of like my kids starting school I'm like, my youngest is going to start in September, and then I'll have my entire mornings free just for myself for the first time in like 6 years, which is kind of crazy to think about. But at the same time, that rigid structure in the morning really forced me to like get up early. Like
Yeah.
I have to be up like at like 6:30 every day, regardless, and someone will wake me up even if I don't want to.
One way or the other, you're getting up.
Yeah, one way or another, man. So that alone really forced me to be like, okay, prioritize. You've got this time period between when your son's at school, when he comes home from school, and then the afternoon is just like is madness, is pure chaos, you know? So it's totally unpredictable. I might be able to get some stuff done in there, but the mornings are much more, they're a combination of predictable and flexible, which is really nice.
Okay.
The other thing is that Mushroom Blues, just as like a marketing process, kind of broke me, which is like, you know,
Yeah, because you had quite an extensive launch and tour, and you were marketing the heck out of that for a full
like a
year,
a year and a half. Yeah. So it was a combination of like, okay, this is my debut novel and I wanted it to do really well. I had all these resources, so I tried to take advantage of everything as much as possible. Podcasts and friends and booktubers and bookstagrammers and the whole thing. So that was just like constant. The book tour was like too much, you know? And this, like the one from A Murder Most Fungal, is like kind of pared down quite a bit, even though there's still quite a lot in it. If someone just looked at it, like glanced at the tour, they'd be like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, there's still a lot there. Yeah.
There's still a lot there, but it's pared down and it's much better organized in terms of like how often I'm recording things, when things are live versus when things are pre-recorded, when things are pre-recorded versus when they release, and all that kind of stuff. So I've got like a much more chill kind of tour trajectory this time around. But Mushroom Blues was like, it was like a 2.5 month tour, and then after the tour ended and the book is out and everything like that, like I didn't stop. I just kept doing, like my tour just kept going. Essentially, I just didn't call it a tour. I kept doing interviews. I was doing like, you know, at least like 3 or 4 a month for quite a while. And then and I signed up for SPFBO, and SPFBO kind of like amplified the whole process and was like a very huge source of anxiety behind the scenes.
Really?
And I've talked to friends about this, like Crystal Matar, and I've talked a lot about this, like about this weird pressure that SPFBO can put on your book. And I was the first finalist to be announced, and then I ended up tying for first and getting second place in a tiebreaker. And so it's basically like I started SPFBO in May of 2024, and it didn't end until May of 2025. So it was a year. It was an entire year of this like added stress behind the scenes, which I'm really grateful for, because I think SPFBO did a lot to boost my book and kind of garner that visibility and everything like that. And like I ended up getting like nominated for British Fantasy Award, which is just like insane. And I think that SPFBO definitely helped to kind of, because Mark Lawrence runs the competition, and because of his sort of role and relationships within the British SFF scene, that SPFBO, I think, had a big hand in kind of like getting my book in front of the eyes of judges and people who are like willing to nominate for that kind of thing, right? Absolutely, and so it's kind of like all these knock-on effects. And I look at it all this time later and I'm like, I'm really happy because the snowball effect is there, right? It's like, it's nothing to scoff at what I've been able to do with that book, but it was exhausting. And A Murder Most Fungal is kind of me saying like, I'm done with Mushroom Blues. I love that book, but I'm done with you. And I need something to help me move on. And so it was kind of like a combination of the Book of Spores and writing a novelette for that, and working on some short stories, and then working on A Murder Most Fungal, were these kinds of projects that helped me like move away from this sort of like this behemoth in my mind.
Right.
And through the process of working on those other projects, kind of figuring out a more sustainable sort of routine and relationship when it comes to writing.
Sure. Yeah. No, and that's so important. And I think it's underestimated how much especially when you're trying to do that level of marketing push, how much effort is behind it.
Dude, it's a lot. And it's a
lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, to take that break, you know, even if it's just a symbolic break for your own mental well-being, in that, you know what, I'm going to put this aside because we'll talk about this yet, but I don't think Mushroom Blues is done with that storyline, let's call it.
No. I mean, like Mushroom Blues is book 1 in a series, so it's definitely not done. But when I say I'm done with Mushroom Blues, I'm done with marketing Mushroom Blues.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'll specify that. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Good. Phew. No. But, you know, being able to work on something that's maybe not completely different, but different. And is sometimes what you need. I mean, and that's what Bartender Between Worlds was for me, because I just like hammered out, 1,000 pages of my Fractured Orbit series, and I needed to do something fun as a break from that. I still haven't gone back from that break, but that's really where that came from. So I totally get it, because I didn't push book 2 and book 3 as hard as Eclipse. But for Eclipse, I was doing this kind of the same thing. I was doing the tours I was doing, and then trying to do my own podcast and trying to do writing on top of that. You burn yourself out pretty quick, and you had a lot more going on than I did even at that time. Yeah. So sometimes, just to ensure that you don't just stop writing, you need to write something different in order to not lose that spark, but also be able to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like I could have just like moved straight on to book 2, and that's not to say that I haven't worked on book 2 at all, because it's been going on behind the scenes. It's just more so been like I needed something to be like a bit of a respite, right?
Yeah,
and
of course, yeah.
it's set in the same world, so it feels adjacent, but at the same time, it's like there are some characters that are from book 1 who are all, and then other characters who are also going to be in book 2. But it's like the POV character in A Murder Most Fungal is totally different. Book 1 was from the perspective of Henrietta Hoffman, who's a human detective, whereas A Murder Most Fungal is a standalone from the perspective of a fungal named Pocho Jiro, and he's basically like the in-world equivalent of like a master sushi chef kind of thing. And so it's like tonally has a lot of difference from Mushroom Blues. And in terms of the perspective, there's so much more sort of exploration that I was able to do through the lens of a character who's like a mushroom person as opposed to a human, someone who's much more, their entire life is centered around food and restaurants and all this kind of stuff. And so it was like, for me, it was kind of a way to tap into like the nostalgia of my days working in restaurants. And it felt less, let's say, it had less consequence than Mushroom Blues, where it's like, here's a murder and we have to solve this murder. And in A Murder Most Fungal, of course there's a murder, but the murder hasn't been committed yet.
Right.
The murder is like someone's being blackmailed into committing the murder. Right. And so it's kind of like less a police procedural and detective story and more crime thriller mixed in with this kind of huge element of food and cuisine and restaurants and that kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Because you really, you really switched subgenres in this book. It's not the crime noir that Mushroom Blues was, or is. So, but you've still, now I know it's not officially out yet, but you're still keeping it in the same series. You just kind of label it as 1.5. Is that?
Yeah, so it's basically like this book takes place after Mushroom Blues and before book 2, but this book leads directly into book 2. So it's kind of like, it is a standalone, but it's from the perspective of this character Pocho Jiro, who ends up becoming a part of the Hoffman Report series in book 2. So this is kind of just like a standalone within the scope of the series. And that's kind of my plan for a lot of like the Fungalverse stuff going forward, is like, after book 3 is done, then I have some ideas for things to do, or even like after book 2 is done, like I have some ideas for things to do between book 2 and 3 and whatnot. And I have some projects that I can't announce yet that are in mediums that are not books that are also kind of tying into this.
Intriguing.
Into this, I can tell you off air. That are also kind of like tying into this framework, right? So for me, it's really fun because it's like, okay, it's a standalone, but for anyone who's read Mushroom Blues, it enhances it. But for anyone who jumps straight into this one, it's not like it outright spoils anything. It alludes to things that happened in Mushroom Blues, and you can see sort of like the ripple effects of the consequences, but it's not outright spoiling the events. So someone could jump into A Murder Most Fungal and then go back and read Mushroom Blues.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, you've really created a second entry point into the series, right? Like they can pick this one up and really enjoy it and want to know more about the world and the characters and that sort of thing and explore.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know, we've kind of talked around it a bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about the world itself? Because it is quite a really unique world that you created for this series. So for listeners who maybe have not read Mushroom Blues or haven't heard about it, just give us a brief overview of the world that you created here.
So the world of Mushroom Blues, A Murder Most Fungal. So you can kind of imagine it as like an alternate Earth type situation. where there are humans, but there's also a pocket of humans who have essentially like merged symbiotically with mushrooms. And so they're kind of like isolated on this archipelago of islands in the middle of the ocean called Hapon. And it's, sort of like me drawing inspiration from Japan and Korea and China and fusing them with mushrooms and adding my own stuff in there and looking at religions like Buddhism and Shintoism and Taoism and kind of creating this race of people, the fungal people, the Japanese, who are, isolated from humanity for most of history. And then prior to Mushroom Blues, the humans from a nation called Caprinia, which is kind of like analogous to colonial United States or colonial Britain, and they invade Hapon for reasons that are not yet known, but will become known as like the series in the world expands.
Mm-hmm.
So they invade Hapon, and then there's a 10-year war called the Spore War. And Mushroom Blues takes place in the aftermath of that war. So that war lasted 10 years. Mushroom Blues takes place a couple of years after the Spore War. And it's just left Hapon and the capital city of Neokanoko in complete shatters. And so the humans have stayed in Hapon and are essentially like an occupying force. And so it's kind of a situation that is rife with, of course, like imperialist and colonialist kind of intentions. But there's also like racism and discrimination and food shortages and all these kinds of things that I was drawing inspiration from, Japan after the events of World War II and the Allied occupation of Japan, or the state of Vietnam after the Vietnam War. You look at places like Afghanistan and Iraq as well in the aftermath of the Afghan and Iraqi wars. And you can kind of just see these sorts of analogous circumstances where here's like a far superior, technologically superior civilization who is attacked another, and essentially what happens in the aftermath. So Mushroom Blues is dealing with that through the lens of crime and policing and the role of a detective in that kind of circumstance, but also the role of a human detective in a fungal city that's being ruled over by humans.
Mm-hmm.
And then A Murder Most Fungal is kind of flips that on its head. And here you have a fungal who is essentially like the most renowned chef in the entire archipelago. And what does a renowned chef do during the war, right? Nobody's going to restaurants. And but that reputation still lingers, right?
Yeah.
People might talk about like this meal that I had, 10 years ago or 12 years ago or whatever.
Sense of nostalgia around, surrounding his reputation and all that.
Exactly.
Right?
And that sense memory of taste and in combination with like the visual aspects of it and the smells and all that kind of stuff. And so his reputation literally preceded him. And the leader of the human occupation, a man by the name of Duncan MacArthur, essentially sought out this chef to bring him on as his personal chef and the leader of his private kitchen. So imagine like taking like a Michelin star chef and basically turning them into like your indentured servant kind of thing. Right. And that's the circumstance that Pocho finds himself in, where he's a fungal in a city and a nation of fungals who are being subjugated by these human occupiers, and he's the personal chef for the leader of that very occupation. There's a lot of room for like tension and racial dynamics and really interesting kinds of conversations, all while exploring food and talking about food and eventually killing with food.
Yeah, I mean, you have wrapped so much into that. And I mean, there's a bunch of threads I want to pull at, but I want to first talk about your world building and your process for world building because you're not telling just the story of these individuals in their circumstances. You're telling a story of these individuals with the backdrop of this multifaceted world that you've created. So and obviously you've got future things planned. How do you start with that backdrop, or do you have the storyline that the backdrop has built around? Like, how did your universe work around the storyline, or has it been kind of a combined effort?
I think combined is probably the best way to put it, because before I wrote Mushroom Blues, I was writing a book called Spore City, which I will eventually get around to publishing. It's just like that was the first book I wrote, and it was a mess. And I took a break from it and wrote Mushroom Blues, and then decided that Mushroom Blues was going to be the first book that I published. Prior to writing Spore City, I'd spent like years doing world building, and that world building was like kind of coming up with the foundations for the religion and for the fungal people and how their biology works, their architecture, and a lot of my process is visual. So it's like I'm doing illustrations and stuff like that. I have a folder full of like illustrations from that time, and to this day, like I do illustrations for all of my books, and
Yeah,
and
there's
kind of
somewhere in
getting
the background behind you there.
yeah, I'm kind of getting
Yeah,
into the process of like incorporating more and more illustrations into my book. So it's not just here's text. It's like here's,
yeah.
weird, in the case of A Murder Most Fungal, like here are like weird fungal animal hybrids kind of thing. And
Mm,
so there's a lot of fun stuff that I'm able to play around with there. But that world
right.
building process was kind of like the foundational period. And then I started writing Spore City because I realized like there's nothing there in terms of here's all this world building, but there's not actually a narrative going on. I didn't know what I was doing or plan anything in particular. So
Well,
I
you did
think
it Tolkien style. You built a world and then decided that it needed a
yeah,
story. Is that? Yeah.
yeah. And then I just started figuring out like, okay, what's the timeline? And that's when like the Spore War came into creation as sort of like this pivotal event. And I like the idea of books that take place in the aftermath of like a world-shattering event, because the
Right.
aftermath is really fascinating. Not to say that I won't go back and explore the Spore War at any point, because I will, but I think it needed to start out at a point where it's like we're not right in the middle of like, you could look at like the Wheel of Time and be like, okay, that is the world-shattering event, literally. But I didn't want to write that. I wanted to see like what took
What
place
happened after?
afterwards. And so
Yeah,
that made
I
sense for
like
Mushroom
that.
Blues. Since then, I'm kind of just like building it out as I go.
Mhm.
So A Murder Most Fungal and the novelette that I wrote for hi Michael, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, yeah. Michael is usurping my questions here.
It's okay, man. He's a fellow
We'll get there.
podcaster.
I know. I get it.
He
I
he
get it. My
he's like
phrase
he's like the yeah. He's like,
goes bugging him.
the Shaq to your Kobe kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Michael got the honor of being the first live guest app session. So
Yeah,
we're in good company here.
we appreciate you, buddy.
Absolutely.
So from there, it's kind of like I've got this sort of like history mapped out. Like the novelette that I wrote for the Book of Spores anthology is essentially like an in-world folktale that takes place like thousands of years before Mushroom Blues and A Murder Most Fungal. And
Yeah.
so it's
Right.
really cool that I'm able to like jump around in time and sort of explore like what is the deep history of this world. When is it a fitting time for me to write like a fungal samurai epic? Or when is it a right time for me to delve into the Spore War? Or when is it a good time for me to jump forward a few decades from the events of like the Hoffman Report, and you know that's where Spore City takes place. And that's the start of like a much more cyberpunk kind of aesthetic and future for this particular world. So it's kind
Okay.
of like a mix of figuring out based on the framework and the skeleton that I've built over time, especially during those like world building years,
Hmm.
and figuring out like A, what is the genre and like the genre mashup, and B, what is like a fitting time period for that. And everything else just kind of flows a little bit naturally from it. And the fungal people and like their biology, that's stuff that like I was able to establish and figure out to the point where it's like, okay, the fungal of A Murder Most Fungal is not that different from the fungal in The Stem Cutter's Daughter, which is the novelette in the anthology. But there are certain things that you can see in terms of like the cultural milieu, in terms of like their resources, in terms of like there are like little clues in there about like, okay, this is like, fungals who are living in sort of like more communal villages. And they're more like early agrarian versus here are fungals who are living in this huge urban sprawl together, right? And so
Hmm.
it's really interesting to be able to figure out like, okay, how different would they be if I placed them 3,000 years in the past versus this particular time period, right?
Hmm.
And then
Yeah. Right.
if I jump back a few hundred years, what would it be like? The
Right.
fungal biology
Yeah.
would be very similar, but there wouldn't be any humans. And the political and cultural landscape would change, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
been a
Right.
really fundamental thing for me, is kind of figuring out like how the fungal people function on like a biological and societal and cultural level, such that I can move the timeline along and figure out how the circumstances around them would shift depending on that time period.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. You're totally telling the story of people at a certain time and place in
Mhm.
certain circumstances.
Yep.
And you develop this, not just a world, like a timeline, which I just find just absolutely fascinating. My brain does not work that way. I mean, I get glimpses. I mean, I'm not a plotter, which I get the sense that you are. And you probably have to be to some degree
Mhm.
in order to do that. I have glimpses of different things in the multiverse that I have, but then I open a door and I'm like, I shouldn't have opened this door because now I want to go and explore this, this realm. So in saying all that, do you have an overarching idea of like, because you have these stories in different places and times in this world. Do you kind of have an overarching funnel or like endpoint that everything is kind of going to come towards? Like, do you have that kind of mapped out, or is this
Mm,
really just exploration of this world that you created?
I think it's more like each like particular time period will be its own self-contained exploration of the world. I don't necessarily want to have like, here's this like be all end all moment or whatever, and have it have to feel like everything that came before that is building up towards that. It's more like the Hoffman Report is the Hoffman Report. That is a 4-book series with standalones interspersed throughout, right? Or the Spore War is the Spore War, and you can kind of see the ripple effects of that across different books.
Okay.
But, if I'm going back to Fungal Samurai, I'm not going to be like, yes, there are going to be causal events that ripple across time, but not necessarily like all of these are reaching towards this very particular endpoint.
Specific
That,
conclusion, right?
yeah, exactly. That essentially is like, there is no capstone for the entire shared universe. It's more so like,
Dang.
every series is self-contained in terms of like its particular story, but there are consequences and repercussions that can ripple across time
Right.
into series that are taking place in the future. Like there's an event that's referenced in A Murder Most Fungal that in my head takes place during the Fungal Samurai era. And so it's like this event that takes place like hundreds of years before, when like the Spore War hadn't happened, the Caprinian humans hadn't invaded the Japanese archipelago yet. But it's like already I'm kind of like planting seeds for these ideas that I will
Right.
explore later on. But it's not necessarily like because X happened and because Y happened, then Z is the ultimate conclusion. It's
You're
kind
not
of
bringing
like,
the Avengers together at the end.
no,
They're Easter eggs that, are causing ripples
exactly.
throughout, the timeline, just as,
Yeah,
our society would, but obviously they have their own events and that sort of thing.
exactly. And then that allows
Yeah.
me a lot of flexibility to play around with side projects. And right now I'm kind of in a stage where I'm like really exploring different mediums. So it's like not just books, but like how can the fungal verse expand to other stuff like graphic novels and audio and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like, where are these opportunities based on like the confines that I've created around like, say, a particular series, as opposed to here are the confines that I placed around the entire shared universe.
Sure,
Feels a
for sure.
lot more restricting and a lot less creatively satisfying, I think. Because it's like you
Definitely.
look at the MCU right now and you're like, man, after Endgame, it's kind of gone to shambles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that tying thread was gone, right? And
Yeah.
it just didn't work anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's basically like, here's this entire puppet and all these strings that are attaching to all these different pieces of the puppet, all its limbs and everything like that. And then after Endgame, it's suddenly like the puppeteer's like, yeah, I'm out. Bye. And what happens after that? And so for me, it's kind of like having a shared universe that feels unified in terms of context as opposed to content is way more interesting, because the context is of the world and the people that inhabit it across time, and the content can be these like smaller packages within the broader whole. So
I love that. Yeah. Well, that's great. I absolutely love that. And it gives you so much to work with in the future.
exactly.
And yeah, very cool. Let's get to Michael's question here, because it is
Yeah.
a question that I had. And sorry to give you a hard time, Michael.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
just bugging you. But yeah, so what is the biggest thing, or I know we talked a little bit about, how you marketed and that, but other than that, I guess, what is kind of one of the biggest things or some of the biggest things that you learned from Mushroom Blues that carried you into The Murder Most Fungal?
So I'm gonna, because we already talked about the marketing stuff and how Mushroom Blues kind of broke me, because that whole period of time really taught me a lot about, like, let's say like the self-publisher entrepreneurial side of things, the business side of things. But I'll take Mike's question and kind of reframe it from like, what did it teach me about narrative and about storytelling? And I think for me, the biggest lesson that I got from Mushroom Blues was how to, because like I'm always going to be blending genres, right? It taught me a lot about how to pick a single sort of like subgenre or like story framework that people are familiar with. So in the case of Mushroom Blues, that was police procedurals and like murder mysteries, and kind of allowing that framework to be the training wheels for people entering into this world.
Mm.
And so for Murder Most Fungal, let's say like the training wheels, the framework is essentially like Hong Kong crime thrillers is kind of like the it's that in combination with like, you know, your favorite reality TV chef kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Which, I mean, I love how you're always like, you're pulling this, one thing from here and one thing from here and putting them
Yeah.
together. We're just making them work into something completely unique, which I just think is so fantastic.
Thanks,
You're
man.
not
Yeah.
just you're not just telling, a crime procedural in this world. I mean, you're combining it with all sorts of different elements from different types of storytelling.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, like the opening scene of A Murder Most Fungal is essentially just like picture your, like if you've ever watched like Chef's Table or something like that, right?
Hmm.
And you've got those scenes in every episode where there's like a montage of here's this chef like in the moment, you know. It's kind of like their muse montage where
Hmm.
they're like, here's them like in the zone, here's them crafting this beautiful dish, here's the result of the all this work. And then you got these beautiful shots of the dishes from like different angles and stuff like that. And you've got the classical music that is very like particular to Chef's Table, but I think has been adopted by like a lot of culinary TV.
Hmm.
Emphasize the artsiness and like the cultural significance of cuisine, right?
Hmm.
So just like imagine that, and then just watch it like fall apart as it becomes like an episode of The Bear. You know what I mean? So I'm using like a framework of like, I would say the Bear in combination with like a Hong Kong crime thriller. As The Bear is essentially like, I don't think it's necessarily a comedy, even though it like always gets nominated for comedy awards, which makes me kind of laugh. It's like there are comedic moments, but this is a drama. This is a family drama, but
Hmm.
there are just like comedic moments within this madness, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, here's this chaos in the kitchen through the lens of something like The Bear. But then you start to add elements to it where it's like, here's the chef who's being blackmailed by gangsters in order
Hmm.
to do certain things for them, right? And so you start to get
Right.
this Hong Kong crime thriller element that's kind of mixing in there with the
Hmm.
drama of something like The Bear, and all of that with the flair of, you know, like Chef's Table, or Jiro
Right.
Dreams of Sushi was like a huge inspiration for this
Hmm.
book. I absolutely love that documentary. It's basically about like a master sushi chef in Tokyo, and he has a restaurant just like in like a Tokyo subway, but it's like
Really?
one of the most lauded
I'm gonna
sushi
go
restaurants in the
look
entire
this
world.
up here.
Yeah. So Jiro Dreams of Sushi, and I took Jiro and applied that name to the titular character as well. But
Great.
it's kind of like that combination. People are familiar with food, right? They love shows like The Bear. They love like crime thrillers. Maybe not necessarily Hong Kong crime thrillers. It could be like Martin Scorsese or something like that, right? But these are structures that people are familiar with. But then add on top of that, like I'm infusing in these elements of weirdness and fungi and all this kind of stuff. So you're like, oh yeah, food. And like I created a 6-course menu for this, like a tasting menu for this book.
Yeah.
So it's like it's
Right.
divided.
Which is
It's yeah,
amazing.
like I call the novel a Michelin star. So I call it like a Michelin star tragedy in 6 courses. And it is
I
very
love it.
very
I
much like
love
a
the
tragic.
structure of it. It's so cool the way you've structured it. Because I mean, you gave me the sampler, so I've obviously only seen the first bit of it. But it is, I mean, just the presentation of it and that division just brings you into the experience, and it sets the stage
Yeah.
for what you're
Yeah,
doing.
because basically how I've structured the book is there are 5 parts to it. The first chapter starts with the first course, and by the time you get to the end of the book, you're enjoying the dessert. And maybe you're not enjoying the dessert because it is a very
But there
tragic
is
story.
dessert.
There is dessert. There is dessert. But even then, like the way I've structured it is like, okay, here's course 1, but the first course always ends with a palate cleanser, and those palate cleansers are like interludes kind of thing. And those are flashbacks into different periods in Pocho's past. And so it gives me this opportunity to be like, here's this person, where they are now, where they've come from, and essentially how his life falls apart through the lens of food. So
Right. Yeah.
mixed it in with all of that familiarity of food and you know, crime thrillers and these kind of structures that we are familiar with, similar to
Mhm.
Mushroom Blues. I use that as kind of like a leverage point to be like, okay, I've given you that. Now let me throw some weird shit in there. Now let me gross you out let me throw in some body horror. Let me make this like really uncomfortable. Or let me make this really fascinating and beautiful, because it's like, you might
Well,
not necessarily want to eat the food because it's like these are like in the first chapter, like one of the characters is like cooking a mold speckled sea bream. So it's like you might not necessarily be like, yeah, that, but in your
that
head you're kind of
sounds
like,
tasty,
like a sea bream, or like here's a tuna, but it's a fungal fin tuna. So you have this weird contradiction in your head of like, that sounds delicious, but it's kind of also gross. And so it was really fun for me to be able to play around with it.
The language that you use in that opening scene, I mean, there's so much aesthetic there. Like, I mean, you've done such a good job of creating that experience that, maybe the description of the food doesn't sound great from what it is, but the way he's preparing it, it brings you into that experience, into the kitchen. And I mean, it really immerses you. It's a really immersive experience. So even if you're not hungry for what he is making, you may be hungry.
I mean, that's my hope. Like, I hope when people read the book that they just get more and more hungry, despite the fact that it might also like coincide with like a deep seated kind of feeling of disgust. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's like, I want your stomach to grumble, but also like churn with discomfort. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm hungry, but also uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's really fun. It's really fun to be able to like balance that. And that was like the biggest lesson that I took away from Mushroom Blues, is kind of like having that framework as sort of like training wheels. And and this one probably like food is like the biggest sort of leverage point, where it's like everybody eats. Everybody has different relationships with food, but if someone describes food to you, then you can understand that. And so it's kind of like giving people that familiarity and then slowly ratcheting up the weird and disgusting and uncomfortable as the story goes along.
Right. Yeah. And what better way to connect with your reader, right? Than bringing in a sense of familiar, even though it's a world that's unfamiliar, you're giving them something that's familiar to bring them in, which I mean, I think is brilliant, really.
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate that.
In talking about food, I do want to ask you a little bit. I noticed that the dedication of the book was to Anthony Bourdain. And so obviously there's some sort of influence there and inspiration for this. Do you want to talk a little more about that? How did that inspiration kind of work into coming up with this work?
So it is dedicated to Anthony Bourdain. There are also 2 other dedications, but like I think on like a culinary level, Anthony Bourdain is probably like the most influential, I would say, like TV chef personality, but just like a person who's writing about food and talking about food, and how that changed my perspective on how I think about food through his TV shows. Like No Reservations, Parts Unknown is one of my favorite, because those are like cultural travel documentaries through the lens of food, but it really opened my eyes to the ways in which food is a window into an unknown place. And so it's like, for me, when I go traveling, like I've lived all over the world, and like I live in Ecuador now, food has been like my gateway to understanding a culture, and not necessarily understanding everything about a culture, but getting a glimpse into what food do these people eat? What is kind of like common tradition around food? How does food relate to the family? How does food relate to work? Like I look at somewhere like North America, where people are like drinking coffee on the go, right? Or they're like snacking on the go. And then I go somewhere like Italy, and people are like taking their time. They stop at a cafe, they eat their breakfast, they have their coffee, they talk to their friends. It's communal. It's much more interactive experience. And that says a lot about each culture, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been really insightful. And Anthony Bourdain was kind of the biggest influence on me in terms of him in conjunction with traveling and living around the world. Really.
Yeah, because you've done a lot of traveling in addition.
That combination gave me new perspectives on what I think about when I meet new people, what I think about when I go to new places. Even if I meet someone and we're not in the place that they're from, like all the friends that I made in Vancouver, all the friends that I made in Berlin when I lived in Germany, all the friends that I have around me here in Ecuador. One of the things that we do together is we cook and we eat, right? And to me, that is such an important experience, because food is the opportunity I'll equate it to this. As people open their stomachs for a meal, they also open their hearts. So food is that opportunity for you to nourish somebody with something delicious, to also participate in the act of cooking and preparation and all of that stuff together. And then as you're enjoying the meal together, that's when the heart opens and you're able to have really honest conversations with people. And so for me, it's like food is it is the most like truthful language that humans are capable of producing. And it doesn't require you to understand a particular language or a particular dialect or what have you. You can go anywhere in the world and you can connect with somebody else through food. It is the most honest thing that humans are capable of, in my opinion. Maybe other than music. I would put music and food in that, in that category.
Kind of similar, really. In that framework. It's very similar, music and food. But yeah, that's absolutely beautiful, man. That's fantastic.
So so thank you, Anthony Bourdain, for that. No, but there are lots of chefs that I'm really grateful for. Like I grew up on Gordon Ramsay and Jamie Oliver, and Chef's Table was like a really cool experience for me to be able to see different chefs from different parts of the world. There's even like a Peruvian chef, what's his name, Virgilio something, and he's a chef in Peru, and I was actually able to like go to his restaurant and like try his food. And so it was really cool for me to be able to like see this documentary about someone and then actually go to the place that they're running and kind of get that through line of, here I'm like a voyeur just kind of like watching something, and then here I'm an active participant in what this person is doing, the experience that they're creating.
Yeah, right. So now, do you cook quite a bit? Are you, is that something that you're quite doing? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, obviously you have a passion for food. So
yeah, food is like, as a parent, but also even before I became a dad, food was such an integral part of my day-to-day life. So it was like when I was living in Vancouver, I was working at a restaurant, hanging out with chefs, hanging out with like front of house staff, just like immersed in that environment while I was studying at university. That's where I met Nicholas Eames, who I also dedicated this book to. And then like my roommates and I and my friends and I, what we would do is like we would hang out and cook together. Like come over to my apartment, we'll smoke a bit and we'll make some delicious food and we'll hang out and chat and, go to the park, go for a walk and stuff like that. Same thing in Berlin. So much of my interactions with my friends was centered around like, what are we cooking together? And so people's apartments kind of became nodes in this social network, not in like the kind of gross, annoying way that it has become on social media.
Yes.
But a literal social network where these nodes were essentially like communal tables that we would go to and we would cook and hang out and get to know each other better.
Yeah.
And then we would travel around Europe together, and food would be something that we had as this like shared experience. And now living in Ecuador, I connected with my wife's family first through food. We cooked together even though I didn't speak any Spanish, but we were able to communicate through body language and food.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Now with my sons, it's like I'm cooking for them every single day. My wife loves to cook too, so we're kind of like interchanging, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But it's really important for me that my sons, A, eat good food, that they're nourished and happy and healthy, right? But at the same time that they're curious about food. And so they're eating things and experiencing things that, I never experienced as a child growing up in like, not like a conservative Western family or anything, but just like, I don't know, like you're from British Columbia as well. And so it's like this like lack of curiosity that results in a pretty rudimentary palate and recipes that are more based on, what came from Britain, or kind of adaptations of things from the United States, or
a lot of
it, spins on European immigrant dishes. So it's like our version of spaghetti in Canada was like a disgrace for someone in Italy, right?
For sure. Well, yeah. And I think, I'll do you one worse. I actually didn't grow up in BC. I grew up in Alberta. So, and rural Alberta. So, and I often talk about this with my sisters and with my friends too. Like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So, it's not only that, a lot of it just that there wasn't as much available to us back then as there is now, right? Like you didn't get, growing up in northern Alberta, we didn't have access to sushi or anything outside of like I ate a lot of processed food. I don't know how I made it as long as I did. So it wasn't until similarly, it wasn't until I was older, until I was able to experience food, and travel was a big part of that for me as well. So that is why I brought up the Anthony Bourdain, because I found him very inspiring as well, right? And when you travel with friends, whether that's living abroad with them or even just traveling with them, those moments are what kind of tie you to those moments in time, right? There's a real connection between those moments in time and the experience and how you've enjoyed it all, right? So,
Yeah. Oh, dude,
but yeah,
that actually gets into something that I really love. Have you ever seen the movie Ratatouille?
I have,
The
yes.
the Pixar movie. Okay, so one of my all-time favorite movies. Also a big inspiration on A Murder Most Fungal, even though it's like it's a kids animated film,
Yeah.
right? But like I love Pixar films in particular for
The storytelling
the
framework that they have is
yeah, but it's
always,
like it's so multi-layered, right?
yeah.
So it's like the first time I watched Ratatouille versus like me watching Ratatouille with my kids. For me, I'm just like, it's unbelievable the dimensionality of storytelling that is going on in
Mm,
movies like that. But I really love in Ratatouille how they express senses through a visual medium. So it's like, how can, the Pixar animators and storytellers convey the deliciousness of food through a medium that we cannot taste or smell or touch?
yeah. Yeah.
It's like we can only hear it, we can only see it. So how do you convey that? And memory is a huge part of that. And it's really cool how in Ratatouille they had certain scenes where it was like, okay, here's Remy nibbling on a strawberry. And then they have like, these like kind of light effects kind of spinning around him and blah blah blah. And then like he dips the strawberry, I think it's with chocolate. Or no, it's with cheese. So it's like the strawberry mixed with cheese. So it's like you have each thing individually and you kind of have like a sensory experience and a sensory memory forming around that. But then you combine the things, you combine the cheese and the strawberry and the lightning burnt walnut to the mix, and it becomes this dynamic, extraordinary experience, right? And so for me, it
Hmm.
was really cool to be able to explore the fact that the fungals are interconnected with each other and that their senses go beyond what we as humans understand. And so it's like, yes, they have taste and touch and smell and sight and sound and all that. But on top of that, they are mycologically interconnected with each other through a network called the fungal net. And so they're able to kind of experience things together and share sensory memories and kind of infuse their thoughts and desires and experiences in such a way that enhances the emotional potential, enhances the possibility for tension. And so it was really cool for me to be able to like talk about food through the lens of the fungal people, because for me so much of food is memory. And in the sense of these fungal people, what does the memory of food say about a particular meal? What does it say about the people that were around you? You know,
Hmm.
there's one where the main character Pocho is essentially like begging his mom to like let him help out with the cooking, and it becomes this really titular moment for him, this really like monumental experience that propels him forward for the rest of his life, where it's like your memory of cooking with your parents and recipes that are passed down from generation to generation, and it's
Hmm.
cool to be here in Ecuador because it's like, this recipe is like from your abuela's abuela, and the fact that these recipes and these traditions transcend time
Yeah.
more than most anything else. It's like you look at something like oral storytelling and you can kind of equate that to culinary storytelling across time.
Right.
And it's really amazing to see the potency of a meal and a recipe and ingredients and the way those ingredients are combined and how that can
Hmm.
come to define a person, define a family, define there are dynasties, literal dynasties built on food,
On food.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, right? Yeah,
So
and I mean, so you get to connect. I mean, I like it because you are connecting the people in the book, even though they are, completely different from us. They have this connection that we are still able to connect with, but you're also providing a medium for them to connect in a way that I think, depending on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole of this, I mean, they have this collective experience, right? That they have not that they're experiencing that perhaps we could if we, were allowed ourselves to be connected in this way a lot more than we've essentially cut ourselves off from in a lot of ways, right? And take that to whatever degree you want to. But, the connectiveness of us as humans that we've kind of, at least in Western culture, have, lost a lot of,
yeah, no,
right?
100%. And then honestly, like the fungal net started as an analogy for sort of like cyberpunk explorations of brain-to-brain communication.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's kind of been interesting to live through, like, the more connected we become through social media and the internet and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of coming out in studies, whether it's like psychological studies or social studies and things like that, where these so-called social systems, networks, whatever you want to call them, are actually not fulfilling the same psychological and emotional and mental requirements that we once fulfilled through collective experience. And, whether that's around a dinner table, whether that's, I was actually like, I just stumbled across a reel of Harrison Ford talking about like essentially the loss of the communal movie theater experience.
Yeah.
And how so many people don't watch movies at the theater anymore. And like, like kids make it really difficult for me to do that. So I don't really go to the movies that much anymore. As an industry, as a creative industry, there was so much, let's say, like social diffusion that was not necessarily passed through the movie itself, but the space in which the movie was presented. And so a restaurant fulfills a very same function, but through food. It is entertainment and experience and connection and socialization and culture and memory and all these things infused into a place. Right. And so it was really interesting for me to see how social media is progressing, how our interactions with the internet are progressing through the lens of something like cyberpunk, and then now through the lens of food. For me is really disheartening, but I'm still hopeful that, like, maybe our generation will kind of see the implications of everything that's going on right now. And then as we get older, into our 50s and 60s and 70s, and we have kids and our kids get older, then we can kind of, adjust the course of this ship.
Course correct a bit.
Yeah. So that's kind of my hope, and maybe it doesn't necessarily involve, movies as a medium in particular and going to a movie theater, but I think like food is a much more fundamental a necessary part of our everyday lives because we need it to survive. That it feels more valuable. And sorry to movies, but like for me, food is more valuable than films. And so, I guess, it's like food, people will always have food, and food will always say something about people. So whatever creative mediums, whatever shifts they go through, there will always be creativity around food because it is such a necessary piece of our species and how we came to be and how we came to define ourselves and where we're going in the future. If we go to Mars or if we go to some other planet, we're still going to be thinking about food and how to adapt food to a new environment.
Right.
And that will involve it'll still connect us in a lot of ways, and it will involve a lot of creativity in order to adapt not only ourselves to that environment, but also the food that sustains us, right?
For sure, yeah. And I think what Harrison Ford was saying, and to all that, I mean, social media isn't about connection anymore. I don't know if it ever was. I mean, it's about cheap dopamine, right?
I think that was like the perceived goal earlier on.
Yeah, early on. And I mean, to some degree, I mean, it allows me to connect with author friends that I would never have even known.
No, I mean, it's amazing that we can do this right now, right?
So, there is some of that, but the cultural experience, and I talk with this, some of my friends as well, and maybe it's just because of the age we are, but, back growing up, there were cultural experiences like movies that everybody experienced. And even if you didn't go to the theater together, you would talk about those movies afterwards together. And there would be some of that communal experience. But
or even TV shows, it was like, because like back in the days of like syndicated TV, in the 90s, or like the newest video game, right?
Or,
music, video games, all these different things.
Everyone's
like I remember
in their own silo now, right?
Yeah, no, but it's the thing is, it was really fun back in the day that it was like we could exist in our own silos, but then it was like you'd go to school and be like, "Yo, man, did you play GoldenEye?" and blah blah blah, and you start talking about GoldenEye, and then like you'd have like a moment where you're like, "Mom, Dad, can we like throw our chunky ass CRT into the car and take my N64 to my friend's house, or like take my PlayStation or whatever, can we have a LAN party?" just like I'm like a seminal moment for me was going to see Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring in theaters. And just like that experience was, I just went with my older brother and we went to like the midnight screening and my parents were so pissed, but I was up until like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and then like went to school the next day, just like absolutely dead. But then I got to talk to my friends about this
And then
like
you were talking to them about exactly.
incredible experience that me and my
Yeah.
brother had. And then that kind of like builds the excitement. Like, oh, I haven't seen it yet. Like I have to go see it. Oh, like all this kind of like the best version of FOMO. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and now it's like that is amplified to such an incredible extent that it's like the FOMO is constant, like
Mhm.
absolutely constant, and you never feel like you're able to
Stay on top of anything,
stay on
right?
top
Like
of
keep
like
up.
like the zeitgeist is moving faster than you're able to keep up with, and
Yeah.
so you always feel like you're missing out on something. But then social media is kind of gearing us towards wanting to be satisfied by everything as quickly as possible. So for me it's like a really toxic experience, and I think part of why like Mushroom Blues burnt me out so much was just existing in that ecosystem for so long and churning out new ways of marketing and pushing my book and stuff like that. And it's like,
Because
man,
you also have to be in that space too, right?
yeah, as
It's
a
not just you put a
podcaster and like a content creator as well.
it's
Yeah,
not just that you put it up and walk away and be like, okay, I've done my social media. You kind of have to
I yeah
be interactive in it, right? And that's the hard part because then you get lost and your time gets sucked away. And then you're like, what did I do for the last 2 hours? And
yeah and it's
yeah,
like
I hear you.
and
It's rough.
like 2 hours is a significant amount of time.
It
And from
is.
what we were talking about earlier about like how I've kind of like been able to parcel up my time in a much more flexible way, it's like if I go outside of like that designated social media time, then I'm impeding on all of these other things. And what is the value proposition there? What is the value of my social media time consuming more than I should allot it? And is it more valuable than the time that I spend writing or the time that I spend doing design work or podcasting or whatever? And so it's like this is a system that is more and more being designed to completely disrupt everything else that's important in your life.
Essentially.
And for me it's kind of like, I spend so much time every day cooking that it's like, okay, if I'm preparing lunch and it takes me an hour and that's an hour that I'm happy to spend, what happens if I use up that time on social media and then that meal is rushed and it doesn't come out the way that I want? And my
You
sons sit
decide to
down,
make something.
yeah, like or like I make something that's like subpar or whatever, and my sons sit down at the table and they're just like, yeah, like
Yeah. And you're on
they're at
your
an
phone
they're
while you're eating and
yeah, like
right? Like it's not the
they're
same.
at an age where like, they're more fickle than anything. And so it's like one day they'll be like, oh, I love this thing, and the next day they'll be like, ah, it tastes like ass.
Mhm.
It's really difficult to justify spending that much time on social media if it means sacrificing things that are fundamental to like the function of not only my life but also my family.
Your experience of being a
I'm
human,
Yeah,
really.
my
I
experience of
mean,
being a human. And it's like I'm not a full-time author. My main job is a dad, right?
yeah.
And so it was really a beautiful experience for me to write about food through the lens of fiction because it reframed how I think about the role of food in my life. And I think added extra depth to the way that this character relates to food and the ways in which food have played into Pocho's life on like a family level, a career level. What are his ambitions and his desires and things like that? And you can see like the magic and the beauty in it, but you can also see the destructiveness, right?
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
for anyone who has a chef in their life, the hours are untenable for the most part. As a creative person, like I understand the role of obsession in driving a lot of chefs to go to the lengths that they do to perfect their craft and run a business. And for like people like Gordon Ramsay or Jamie Oliver, like opening up these empires, right, of
Really,
restaurants.
yeah.
And it takes a lot of sacrifice to be able to do something like that. And I really felt that as a writer, the sacrifice that goes into creating something
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what is the outcome of this thing, right? Is all
Mhm.
of my hard work paying off? And how would I feel if all of this just like fell apart? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess to that point now, so now that Murder Most Fungal is complete and ready to be out in the world. And sorry, what's the release date of it again?
June 16th.
June 16th. So we're a month away from
Yep.
release date. How are you feeling now that it's done and about to be released into the world? How are you feeling about the experience of completing this project as compared to completing Mushroom Blues? Do you feel more prepared for, I know you've set things up in a way, but do you feel better about the completion of this than looking back at Mushroom Blues? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. This has been like much less stressful, you know?
good. I'm glad
Mushroom
to hear
Blues kicked my ass. And this one was like, I learned big lessons from all of my mistakes with Mushroom Blues. And so it was like a lot less stressful. I had a lot more confidence going into setting things up with, I mean, like publishing a book on like Amazon and everywhere else.
Right.
Like on the design front, like I've designed so many books that is basically like, okay, like this is not, I know how to format this so that it's going to
Hmm.
be uploaded. The PDF is going to be uploaded and it's going to be accepted first try, all that kind of stuff. I know how to format a book. I know how to do all this kind of stuff, like set up a book tour in like 2 weeks and, you know, just like relying on my relationship with all these people in the community, getting signed hardcovers with the broken binding and setting everything up with them. All these different pieces, it was kind of like, okay, I went through that and now it's just a matter of like, I need to do this thing, do the thing. I need to do that thing, do the thing. Yeah. So this has overall
How
been like a
far
much less stressful
Good, good. Yeah.
experience
No, that's good to hear.
than the
So
other
how far
one.
in advance are you setting all that up? Like how long have you been finished with the writing and how long have you been kind of I know we set up this interview I think in like February, but how long have you been kind of preparing for the launch?
No, I mean, it was probably when I started thinking about everything because I was prepping the cover reveal at that point for
That's
March.
right.
So it was like cover reveal was first part, and then it was like February and March. I was kind of putting together like ideas of like how I wanted to do like the release and the book tour and everything like that. So it's just been like, you know, really sporadic. Okay, cover reveal's done. Let's think about finalizing everything for the book tour.
Yeah.
And this thing's done. Let's talk to the broken binding and get everything sorted on that end. So yeah, it's been like a pretty chill ride since like
Good,
I would
good.
say February is more or less like when things started to kind
Right.
of like coalesce.
Yeah.
And once the cover was out, then it was like a lot easier to just be like, okay, here's the thing, and I can start talking about it on the podcast. I can start talking about it in other spaces and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I haven't been like as heavy on the promo as I was with Mushroom Blues, but you know, like the response has been great and people seem to be excited about it. And I'm just kind of like, cool, I'm going to get this book out there and whatever happens, happens. Like, I'm not going to stress myself out about like, I need to meet like certain sales targets and blah, 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 blah,
For
blah.
sure.
It's more so about this is like adding to my stairwell, and this is another step forward for me on top of like all the other things that I have going
Right.
on.
Yeah. You're building your mushroom empire,
Yeah.
you know, one brick at a time kind of thing, right?
One micro brick at a time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Cool. Well, Adrian, I think it's probably a good place to wrap it up here.
Yeah, man.
Let us get on with our evenings. Can you just let our listeners know what's, you know, where they can get your book, where they can pre-order it? Obviously, Mushroom Blues is already out. I'll hold up my copy since I didn't earlier. Both hold them up. Uh, where can they get Mushroom Blues and where can they pre-order Murder Most Fungal?
Yeah, man. So Mushroom Blues is available everywhere. Like you can get it on Amazon in all formats. You can get it on Audible and audiobook. You can order it through Barnes and Noble or Indigo if you're in Canada, whatever it may be. And you can also get signed hardcovers through the Broken Binding. .co.uk, and A Murder Most Fungal, same deal, no audiobook in the works just yet, but you can pre-order it in ebook over on Amazon. It'll be out in hardcover and paperback as well on launch day on June 16th. And then you can pre-order signed hardcovers over on the Broken Binding. They also have like a 2-pack kind of Hoffman Report bundle, so you can get Mushroom Blues and A Murder Most Fungal signed editions with a little discount as well, which is really
Cool.
cool. So
Yeah.
yep, Murder Most Fungal is out on June 16th, and then You can find me all across the board at Adrian M Gibson on social media. You can check out my website, adrianmgibson.com. And then you can check out SFFAddicts wherever you listen to podcasts. There's video on YouTube and Spotify as well if you want to watch the video episodes and see my little sauna and all of its
Your
splendor.
lovely room and background and
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
lovely artwork. And
Yeah.
love it. Love it. Very cool. I will link everything below if you happen to be listening to this on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You'll be able to find SFFAddicts there as well. So check it out. And thank you once again, Adrian. I really appreciate it. This has been a ton of fun.
Thanks, bud.
We will do it again, I am sure.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
kicking off the
appreciate
tour
you
with me.
too.
Means a lot.
You are so welcome. Yeah, good luck
Yeah.
with the rest of it and
Thank you,
good
bud.
luck with the launch.
I appreciate it.